You are in for a real treat if you're visiting Olympic National Park and you're hoping to camp. But there's a lot to know about all the various campgrounds in Olympic, and if you choose the wrong campgrounds, it can be detrimental to your trip. So let's jump in and talk all about camping in Olympic National Park. My name is Ash. I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes, and I'm in Olympic National Park every couple of years. This is one of my favorites. I love visiting the Washington National Parks. I also have camped in this park a few times, and so I want to talk to you today about your camping options, how to get a campsite, how to choose the right campground. So let's jump in because I've got a lot to share with you today. The first thing you need to know is that Olympic has 15 front country campgrounds. If you don't visit the national parks very much, then you might not know that 15 is a massive number of campgrounds. So you have a lot of options here. And that's just talking about the front country ones, the ones that you can drive to. There are a lot of backcountry camping options in Olympic. I'm not going to touch on those backcountry ones in this video. We're going to focus in on those 15 front country campgrounds because that's what most people do when they go. So I'm going to help you get those front country campgrounds all figured out. But just so you know, there are a ton of options in this national park. A few other things to know is that these campgrounds do have 8 people per site limits in place and 2 vehicles per site. So if you have more than that, you'll need to get either 2 campsites or look into the group sites. That's an option too. There's also a 14-day stay limit for the entire park. So if you want to spend a few days in one and a few days in another, that's fine. You can move around. You can try out a few different campgrounds, but just know that you have a total of 14 days that you can stay in the campgrounds in the parks for the whole year. And beyond that, some of the campgrounds have 7-day stay limits for that specific campground. So some of the busier ones like Claylock or the Hoe, those ones will only let you stay for a total of 7 nights for the year. And then you'll need to move to some of the lesser known or the less busy campgrounds if you're wanting to stay longer in the park. So it is kind of a mishmash of things, just trying to figure out where to be, what the limits are, how long you can stay each one. You'll want to pay attention to that when you're picking your campground. Now, what's nice about Olympic, and this is different from other national parks as well, is that Olympic still has a pretty good mix of both first come, first serve campgrounds and reservable campgrounds. So lately, the national parks have really been moving into reservable. Almost everything feels reservable at this point. And so it makes it hard to make last minute plans if you want to visit the park and just do first come, first serve. That's becoming less and less possibility in the national parks at this time. But with Olympic, a lot of the bigger campgrounds, the more popular campgrounds are reservation only, but there are a lot of other campgrounds and other options that are first come, first serve. So again, you can just kind of mix and match and make it something fun, something cool, maybe stay somewhere that you wouldn't otherwise think to stay. Maybe try for some of those first come, first serve sites that are a little bit smaller and intimate. One last thing to know before we jump into what the actual campgrounds are, is that a lot of these campgrounds are pretty tight. You're going to want to watch length limits if you have a trailer or an RV. There's a lot of trees in Olympic National Park, so this park is not great for solar. There aren't really electricity hookups in the park. We have a solar setup on our trailer that just basically never works when we're in Olympic because the sun a lot of times doesn't even make it through the trees down to the ground. So keep that in mind, especially if you're in a larger vehicle or an RV. You're going to want to really pay attention to how big the sites are and make sure that you're watching those site limits because there are so many trees. A lot of the roads are curvy. A lot of them are hard to navigate in and out of. So that's a big thing to watch as well. Let's take a look at a map and talk about your options. All right, so here's the campground map for Olympic National Park, and I will link this webpage into the video description so you can take a look at this. As a first-time visitor to Olympic, there's a few areas that are better to camp in than others, just to get to those main can't miss sites in the park. And that would be this area up here. This is the Heart of the Hills campground by Port Angeles. You've got the Fairholme. I think if I click on them, there we go. The Fairholme campground over here by Lake Crescent. You've got the Solduck campground, which is also by Lake Crescent, but also by like Solduck Falls and stuff like that. That's a pretty popular area of the park. You come around here, you've got Mora out here. This is a nice one if you want to be more by the water. It's right near the ocean, so that's a great one. And then you've got the Hoh Rainforest in here if you're wanting to go to the Hoh. That one, again, is a good option, but you will see that a lot of these are pretty spread out, and this park requires a lot of driving. And so I do actually prefer spending a couple nights in one and then a couple nights in the other as you're making this decision. So a couple more campgrounds that you'll want to be aware of that are also pretty good options are these ones down here by Claylock. So you've got the Claylock campground, which is a reservable campground. That's a really popular one. And then you've got South Beach right here, which is probably one of my favorite campgrounds in any national park. It is so beautiful. You're right on the water. It's pretty awesome. But that one's a first come, first serve that's pretty competitive. So between all of those options, again, I would recommend doing like a night or two at Heart of the Hills or Fairholme or Solduck, kind of stay in this area for a few nights. And then if you want to jump down to more of the Forks area, the town of Forks is over here. And then you can choose one of these four to spend a couple more nights in. And that's a really good mix to be able to get to all the things you want to get to pretty quickly and easily. So as I said, a lot of options. I'm not going to go through each campground individually, but I do want to show how you can find that information so you can make the decision that's right for your group. If you go to dirtinmyshoes.com, which is my website, I have this whole article about camping in Olympic, and I break it down by area. So Port Angeles, as I mentioned, you got Heart of the Hills, and this is a really good option. You'll see all of the information out here for you. You can click on this and it will take you to a map and more specific information about that campground. Deer Park is a small and primitive one, and this is very common. You will find a lot of just these really small ones. You can see this one only has 14 sites. It's first come, first serve. The road to get up here is pretty rough. It's a little bit less friendly. So that's what you'll find when we're looking at this map of campgrounds in Olympic. So you got Heart of the Hills right here, and you've got Deer Park over here. And Deer Park is pretty close to Port Angeles. It's not super far away, but it is much harder to get to. Again, that access road is not great. You can learn a little bit more about it here, but again, I give you some additional information, really helpful information here on Dirt in My Shoes. Moving to the Lake Crescent area campground. So this is actually a really good like middle spot in the park. So if you don't want to move campsites every night or every few nights, choose something in the Lake Crescent area because this is pretty much in the middle of all the main stuff you're going to want to see. So Fairholme, I mentioned, is a really good one. You've got Solduck right there. You've got the Log Cabin RV Resort, which does have hookups and does have showers, so that might be a better option for you. Looking at the map of Olympic, Lake Crescent is right here. You've got Port Angeles and Hurricane Ridge over here. You've got Forks and all the beach stuff over here and the rainforests. And so that, again, is a pretty good option. So Fairholme is on this side. You've got Solduck down this side road down here. Log Cabin Resort is on the other side of the lake. So some pretty good options there. Jumping to the Forks area, so this is a lot more of the beaches and the rainforests. And so I love spending time on this side of the park. It's one of my favorite areas to explore. It is a little bit less luxurious, fewer amenities over here. And so that's why a lot of people kind of like to split their time between Forks and Port Angeles. But you've got the Mora Campground, which is a great one right near the water. The Hoh is in the rainforest. And so if you want to camp in the rainforest near the elk that live in there and the really beautiful moss-covered trees, the Hoh is a great option. Claylock is on the water right next to the ocean, so that's a really great one. And South Beach, as I mentioned before, is also an awesome one right on the ocean. This one's first come, first serve. It's a little more primitive. There's no water. Clay Lock has a little bit more amenities, but it is a reservation only. So again, looking at the map here, so you've got Forks here, you've got Mora, Clay Lock and South Beach down here, Ho over here. Any of these are great options if you're planning on splitting your time between Forks and Port Angeles, which is what I recommend. So again, couple nights over here, couple nights over here. That will really cut down on a lot of the driving while you're sightseeing. As I mentioned before, as a first-time visitor, I would focus on those campgrounds, those ones that I just walked you through and mentioned. But that only covers about half of what's available at Olympic. The thing is once you go away from those campgrounds in those main areas, then the campgrounds get a lot smaller, they get a lot more primitive, much harder to access. So a lot of the roads are dirt, they're narrow, curving mountain roads that are just a little bit harder for people to get to. And they're not going to get you as close to the main sites in Olympic that you'll probably want to be as a first-time visitor. Now, put an asterisk on that though, because some people really love that removed feeling. They actually really want to find solitude when they're in Olympic National Park. And these outlying campgrounds are a really great way to do that because, like I said, they're much smaller, they're much harder to get to, so they just don't stay as busy. So if you're not so concerned about getting to all of the main stuff in Olympic, if you just want to kind of have a really nice, relaxing experience in nature, find some solitude, maybe do something, one or two things a day while you're there, then some of these outlying campgrounds may be a really good option for you. So here's a list of those outlying campgrounds, and I do list them all out really nicely for you so that you can know what you're getting into and what to expect. So these are all listed out here. Again, these are the ones that are a little bit further removed from things, but that might make a really nice addition to your vacation. So again, looking at the map of Olympic, these campgrounds right here are really where you're going to want to focus on mostly. You can go up to Lake Ozette, which has a campground. And then these areas down here are much harder to get to. They're more of a rainforest area, so you get a lot of nice trees and a little bit more water. But again, they're just smaller, harder to get to, but could make for a really cool experience if you're looking for some extra solitude. All right, phew. That's a lot. It's a lot of information to take in. Use that article on Dirt in My Shoes. I'll link it in the video description below, but that will really help walk you through what each campground is like, what to expect, what kind of equipment you can have in there, all of that, so that you can make a good decision. After you've decided where you want to stay while you're visiting Olympic National Park, then I do want to walk you through how to actually get a reservation or how to get a campsite in this national park. First, let's talk about first come, first serve, because this is just a pretty straightforward process. Basically, if the campground is first come, first serve, or if the campground has a few sites that are first come, first serve, you'll want to show up as early in the morning as you can. Usually at least before 8 a.m., you're going to want to get in there. And you'll basically just be trying to find a site that somebody is going to be vacating that day. So if you get there too early, people can get a little upset because they're still waking up, they're still eating breakfast. Sometimes there is a host on duty to help you get those first come, first serve sites, but sometimes there's not, especially in those campgrounds that are a little further removed. So if there is a host, they should help you know which sites are going to be empty starting on that day. And then you can drive around and pick the site you want. You'll pay for it. There's a little stub on your pay envelope that you will then stick on the campsite that you want. And that means that it's claimed for you. So that's pretty straightforward. Some of them, especially if they don't have hosts there, they'll have a board up at the entrance to the campground. And that board, a lot of times they'll say which campsites are taken and which campsites will be available. So you might need to talk to a host. You might need to just consult the board. You might need to drive around the campground and just pick one that's empty. So it's going to depend from campground to campground. To get a reservation at a campground in Olympic that needs reservations, then you're going to use the recreation.gov website. This is the site that a lot of national parks use to make reservations. And so I want to just walk you through quickly what to expect when you get on recreation.gov. Okay, so here I am. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in Olympic National Park. Going to click on camping. It will take me down to the various campgrounds that accept reservations. So all of these campgrounds are pretty popular campgrounds. They are going to be a little bit competitive to get these reservations. In my experience, Olympic isn't as bad as some other national parks, and so you should still have a pretty good shot at getting a campsite somewhere in the park. But let's jump in. Let's go to Claylock. All right, so here's Claylock. It's right on the ocean. It's a really popular campground. Very cool campground. Now, at this point, you're going to put in your dates. If you can be flexible, that's better, because a lot of times you'll see that, a few dates might be more available than others. And then if you have an RV or anything like that, you're going to want to put that in here. So we're wanting to look at campsites that will fit our RV, then it's really important to click that and then put in the vehicle length so that you know what's going to fit your equipment that you have. Okay, but I'm just going to look at what's generally available right now. So a few things that you might see here. If it's grayed out and it says R, that means it's reserved. That's not an option to you. If it has an A, it means that it is available that night. If there's the NR, that means that it has not been released yet. And so you'll see this a lot, especially like at the beginning of the year when people still haven't made their reservations for the summer. You'll see a lot of NRs in here. Now, if you click this NR, then it should pop up and tell you what date that will be released. And so right now it's telling me date and time that this site will be released. And so I'm going to want to put that on my calendar and make sure that I am ready and that I am here exactly at that time. If you're not there exactly at the time, then you really run the risk of just not being able to get anything. So make sure you're paying attention to that time. Make sure you have it on your calendar so that you know when to be here to get those reservations. If there's an X, that means that the campground is not accepting reservations for that site at this time. This one says out of season, which is true. The campground closes that day, and so they're not even reserving that. But a lot of times if there's like a problem with the site and they need to exit out so that people can't stay there, stuff like that, you might see some of those. So scrolling down, you'll see there's a little bit of availability still. A lot of them are reserved. Let's click on something and I'll show you kind of what to look for in the individual campsite. All right, so there's our picture of the campsite. You'll see that if you have an RV, you can have a max length of 33 feet, which is a pretty good size site. Coming down here, it will show where that site is. Obviously, these oceanside sites go a lot faster than the interior ones. And then the other thing you'll want to pay attention to is, especially if you have an RV, is this allowable equipment section. So this will tell you sometimes the RV length and the trailer length that's allowed is different. And so you'll just need to make sure that you're paying attention to that. The other thing is the driveway entry and the length and the tent pad size, all of that is listed down here. So just make sure that you're picking a campsite that can fit the type of stuff that you're bringing. Again, because there are so many trees in this park, the roads can be a little difficult to get in and out of. The sites can be difficult. So you're not going to want to fudge this. You're going to want to make sure that whatever site you reserve is going to fit the equipment that you're bringing. I always go down to this need to know section. Like you can see, there's room for one tent only, and it's close to the next campsite over. So that might not be ideal for you. That's for me. I don't like being next to people when I'm in a tent because then I don't sleep very well. But if I'm in an RV, it might be okay. So you'll see, again, it might be difficult to maneuver. This is 33 feet total. So another thing to pay attention to. It's just really important to read through all of this before you book. Once you go through the sites, and like I said, you can add filters here so that you make sure that you know which sites are going to work for you. But once you do that and you find one that will work for your date, then go ahead and add it to your cart and just finish out the process of paying for it and getting it reserved. So I can't stress the importance of being on recreation.gov exactly on the time and date that it says that the campsite you want is going to be open and available for reservations. And basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to hit the reserve now button or the add to cart button as close to that opening time as possible. And so I highly, highly recommend doing your research before it actually opens up, before the dates that you need, and making sure that you know exactly which campsites are going to work for you and which ones you want to try to reserve first. That's very, very important. So don't come into recreation.gov that morning that the campsites open up for your dates and expect to do that research at that point. You probably will miss out on the campsites that are available. So make sure you do your research in advance. Make sure you know which campsites you are hoping to get and which ones you're going to go for and which ones are going to work for you before the reservation date even opens up. Another tip is to have every adult in your group that will be camping with you make an account on recreation.gov and try to get a campsite reservation as well. You can always if you both get one and you don't need both, you can throw one back out into the pool and you can finish the payment process for the one that you want. But that's a good problem to have. But the more people you can have trying to get these campsites in these national parks, the more luck you'll have getting what you actually need. I hope that gets you started with figuring out the camping in Olympic National Park. If you have any questions about planning your trip to Olympic, I have other videos here on my YouTube channel that will walk you through even more of what you need to know as you're making your trip plans. You can also go to dirtandmyshoes.com. There you'll find my Olympic itinerary where I walk you through hour by hour when to be where, what I would do, how to avoid the crowds. The crowds get so bad in this national park. So it's a really big deal to have someone on your side leading you through this. That's what this itinerary will do. And it will also help you better decide which areas of the park you want to stay in before you need to make those camping reservations. Have a phenomenal time in Olympic National Park. I will see you out on the trail.